Today we're going to be multiplying decimal numbers, which is basically the same as multiplying a normal number, but when you're done, you're going to need to place the decimal in the answer. Now, first we're going to start by using repeated addition to solve these problems with whole number times a decimal. So let's say I had 32 cents, and that happened 3 times. So I could go ahead and put down my 32 cents and just write them on top of each other 3 times, and then I could add them up. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 3, 6, 9, a 0, and the decimal would drop straight down in that addition problem. So basically I'd get 96 cents. Well, I could do the same thing with multiplication. So I would do, okay, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 0 is 0. Now when I'm done, I need to count all of the decimal places in the problem. So looking at our first factor, the 32 hundredths, I have 1, 2 decimal places. Now looking at my next number, it has no decimal places, so I'm not going to count them. So that gives me a total of 2. So that means in my answer, I need 2 decimal places. So I'm going to start at the end, underlining 2 digits, and then place my decimal. And you'll notice I got 96 cents, just like I did on the first problem. So that makes sense when we're multiplying a whole number times a decimal. But what about when we do a decimal times another decimal? Well, think about it. What is 5 times 1? Well, 5 times 1 is 5. So what would 5/10 times 1 be? Well, if 5/10 happened one time, that would be 5/10. But what if 5/10 happened 5/10 of a time? Now this here, 5/10, this is smaller than 1. That means it happened less than one time. In fact, it only happened half a time, like 50 cents is half of a dollar. So it means that 0.5 or 50 cents only happened half of a time. So would it be bigger or smaller? My answer would actually end up being smaller. So if I worked this out and did 5/10 times 5/10, 5 times 5 is 25, and I count my decimal places. This had 1. This also had 1 for a total of 2, because 1 plus 1 is 2. So I need to underline 2 decimal places. So I'd actually get 25 hundredths. And I know that's super weird, but when you multiply a decimal times a decimal, it's actually going to get smaller. So as we go through these, I want you just to place the decimal. So if you have the paper, this is on your paper, and if not, if you will just write this down, jot it down. And looking at the problem, does the 45 have a decimal? No. So we move to the next problem. Does the 1 7/10 have a decimal? Yes, it does. So I'm going to underline. I have 1 decimal place. So I go to my answer, and it should have 1 decimal place as well. So the decimal would go in front of that 5. So pause as you need to go through these problems. So the next one, my first number has 2 decimal places. My second number does not have a decimal, so that's a total of 2 decimal places. So I go to my answer and I underline 2 decimal places, and the decimal would go right in front of them, so I get 1 26 hundredths. Okay, next one, pause, write it down, put the decimal. So there's no decimal in the first number, but there are 2 decimal places in the second number, so my answer would need 2 decimal places. Now I notice when I do this that there is a 0 on the end after the decimal, and anytime that happens, you want to knock off that 0. So I'd get 25 5/10. Go ahead and get rid of the 0. Okay, the next one, no decimal in the first number, 1 decimal place in the second number for a total of 1 decimal place. So our decimal would go right there. Okay, going to the next page of problems. Okay, right now I want you to pause and then look and see if you got the correct answer. So this one only had 1, so it would go right there. Going to the next one, has a total of 3. So it would go in front of this one, and you have a 0 to knock off the end. Going to the next one, it only has 1. And then going to the last one, it has 2. So the decimal would go there. So multiplying these is all about the decimal placement.